to tonight's deliberation session for May 13th. Clerk, would you mind please calling the roll when you have a moment? Don't rush, don't trip.
Councilmember Flaherty?
Here.
Stossberg? Here. Piedmont Smith?
Here.
Zulik is absent. Asari?
Absent.
Okay. Daly?
Here.
Rallo? Ruff?
Here.
Rosenbarger?
Here.
Thank you.
Oh, awesome. Thank you very much. Forgot that I was the one who had started it. Okay, so we are here tonight for our special deliberation session, and it was organized by Councilmember Flaherty. So I'm just going to turn the whole evening on over to Councilmember Flaherty to guide us through our discussion for tonight. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. And I can summarize the agenda to start. So we have a focused topic for the evening, which is identifying opportunities to improve pedestrian safety and accessibility following snow events, and a structure to kind of guide that conversation, starting with a review of city goals and policies that are relevant, moving to discussion of constituent feedback, and an invitation for public comment about people's personal experiences at that time, then a discussion of departmental feedback, and then some discussion of essentially potential policy or potential interventions, some framing for that, as well as workshopping specific issues. Finally, prioritization of next steps from here from both a process and substance perspective, and public comment, and then adjournment. I will kind of, I guess, moderate and facilitate the conversation is my plan. Just a few other preliminary things. Maybe first want to let the other folks joining us tonight introduce themselves. So we have 3 other invited members for the conversation. So we could go ahead and do that if you want to.
Sure. I'm Tim Street. I am the Director of Parks and Recreation for the city.
Casey Garino, member of the Council for Community Accessibility.
Steve Olin, the Chair of the Transportation Commission.
And so that's who we have with us this evening. My apologies for some late-breaking packet addendums yesterday and then today. I had gotten some questions to relevant department heads, including Director Street and Hand, Public Works, and Planning a couple of weeks ago, but between PTO schedules and a few other things, we were still getting answers incoming. So sorry for the late-breaking information there. Also, folks from all those departments were invited to attend, but in the context of that, a few weeks ago, the mayor expressed some concern about staff time having been spent at council meetings in the context of the Hopewell PUD, and indicated folks probably would not be attending. So in any case, we welcome Director Street with us, and understand that others have been in a lot of evening meetings and aren't here tonight. With that, maybe two other things. One, are folks okay using, do we want to use first names tonight? Are folks okay, comfortable with that in particular, given it's not just council?
Great.
Hearing no objections. Okay, great, we can do that. And then second, I just wanted to kind of outline my high level purpose outcome process as we kick off. So the purpose is really just to deepen our own understanding of the issues with pedestrian safety and accessibility in the context of snow removal. What's going well? Where are we most challenged? Are there opportunities for improvement? The outcomes would be to try to actually improve efficacy of snow removal through targeted policy, budgetary, operational changes. And the process is through this discussion and then collaboration with staff to come, probably. So we can talk about that kind of in the closing sections of the meeting, what we envision as next steps, who would like to take lead, that kind of thing. I remain committed to working on this going forward, but if others want to join on that, both from the council and otherwise, we can talk about it. So any questions before we kind of move into the heart of the agenda, the body of it? Okay, great. So I'd like to just start with kind of going over high-level city goals and policies. The initial packet that came out had the relevant section of Bloomington Municipal Code, and then also I did a review of our kind of guiding documents from a planning perspective. Mainly it's the comprehensive plan that has relevant guidance here in the transportation chapter. Most of those goals mention improving sustainability and access. So goal 6.2 with public transit, for instance, talks about improving and expanding an accessible system. Goal 6.3, improving the bicycle and pedestrian network, talks about improving and expanding an accessible, safe, and efficient network for pedestrians. We have a goal around prioritizing non-automotive modes in the transportation network. And so kind of those are the overall themes in the comprehensive plan. The transportation plan does not mention, or only mentions twice, snow, and it's not in this context, so not a relevant piece of the transportation plan. And then Safe Streets for All action plan similarly does not mention snow or snow removal. The final policy document I'd like to mention is actually the draft 2026 ADA transition plan developed by CCA, and Michael Shermis, staff support for CCA, presented to the Transportation Commission just last month. This topic wasn't really covered in that plan either, though it was acknowledged there's a challenge. There is a relevant bit of that plan, though, which is about the Snow Buddies program that has been running, I think, for a couple of years now, where residents who would struggle to clear snow from their own sidewalks can get connected with volunteers who would help to clear that snow, and that there are other volunteers to address other issues like curb ramp snow clearance. Those are the policy documents. Before we move on to city code and that, any questions just about, again, the context where we are now with respect to guiding policy? Things I missed? All good? Okay, sorry, we're just in like level setting mode a little bit. So second is the Bloomington Municipal Code, Chapter 6, Section 7, snow and ice removal, which is really pretty brief. There's kind of two sections. One is about the duty of the abutting property owner. So property owners are responsible for removing all snow and ice from the sidewalk to allow safe and reasonable travel, and the responsibility is to clear that within 24 hours after the snow or ice has stopped accumulating. There is generally a requirement for 36 inches of clearance and 54 inches in the downtown area. And then the second part is about enforcement, which is predominantly, it's in hand. The Housing and Neighborhood Development Department leads enforcement. It is, I think, predominantly done through kind of like a complaint-based or reactive enforcement protocol. And the fines are begin at $50 for repeated infractions over time. They can escalate to $100 and then $150 as a maximum, and they reset after a 12-month period running August 1 to July 31st. So, you know, if you're a repeat offender year after year, you're not penalized for that. You're starting fresh each year. I won't get into some of the operational details on that because that was covered in the hand director's comments in response to questions, but that's the state of the policy. So any questions about that, about what's in code, what the requirements are, whose responsibility is what? You know, this applies to the city government as well, so city departments and entities are responsible for snow clearance for the properties that we own, for instance. Same with other governmental units, but as well.
Do we have jurisdiction over IU for snow clearance? I mean, can we cite them, or they just are beyond our reach?
Good question. Do you happen to know, Tim?
I do not happen to know. That's a good question.
Do you happen to know, Steve? I see it.
We do not have jurisdiction over IU, period. They are a separate state entity. They've made that very clear. The city has the right of way, the 10th Street, for example, at Eagleson. The city has responsibility for the right of way right up to the curb, but IU controls the curb and then some. So they are entirely responsible for sidewalks within the jurisdiction that they call campus. Not every building they own is on campus, but we've never had jurisdiction over them. We can ask them nicely, but I mean.
I'll note that for just confirming and clarification with staff.
It'd be news to me, let's put it that way.
What's interesting is that a lot of the streets that run through campus are city streets.
They are.
But here we're not talking about city responsibility for the sidewalks on the streets. So.
Well, again, in this case, like at that corner, for example, I've seen the actual, property lines. IU controls right up to the curb, and so the sidewalk is not in our jurisdiction.
It varies because I'm aware of
it's not everywhere,
but yes,
but that's common.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Other questions, comments about city code and what's actually required of folks?
Well, I'm wondering if anybody knows of other cities, if any cities where the city takes responsibility for some or all of sidewalks. I mean, it'd be very expensive for a city to do that, but
Yeah.
I wonder if there are any examples out there.
There are some. Maybe we get into that though in the kind of workshopping issues and like the discussion of like workshopping solutions kind of thing. Yes. Okay. Next, then we can move into discussion of constituent feedback. And so here, we could maybe actually just start with council members sharing if you have received feedback from constituents this year or over your years of service. What type of feedback that has been? Do folks have ideas? What challenges are they experiencing? So I wanted an opportunity for council members to share feedback from constituents. I think, Steve, that could also apply to you as a former council member and a Transportation Commission member. Casey, same thing with respect to any complaints the CCA might receive or items for discussion that you have about kind of the resident experience around safety and accessibility. So maybe we start there, and then I want to talk a little bit about the quite extensive data we have from your reports that also help us understand this, and then also have an opportunity for public comment specific to this, like what issues people are experiencing themselves. So yeah, Dave.
Somebody probably will bring this up inevitably, but I get complaints quite a lot often about, especially where people have monolithic sidewalks. That is, you know, they meet the street at the curb, so there's no grass plot. That when a plow comes by, it pushes the snow back on the sidewalk where they've already, you know, so it's a constant struggle, and they feel defeated by the city coming by, and especially during large snow events. And I know just from experience in some states, or some municipalities, they have different types of equipment where it's more like a snow blower type of equipment where they actually lift the snow, put it into a truck beside it. Now, you know, that's a lot of expense, and you know, but it might just to have that in mind when we replace equipment, it might be a good direction to go in just to alleviate this, I think, this chronic problem, because it's a shame, you know, if you've made the effort and yet you get cited. Now, I don't know if that's the case. In fact, I don't even know the citation rate if we actually enforce this. This is a question I've got, and people are curious too, you know, to what extent. You know, I'm having to walk in the street. I don't have a clear sidewalk. Are people actually getting cited for not doing their, you know, their obligation of clearing the sidewalk? Those are two things, obviously, but just wanted to put it out there. Those things.
Thank you. Hobie?
Sure. So I guess some things that constituents have said to me this year are, I've got some suggestions, you can say, about what we can do. They questioned whether we should increase fines, because only having a fine of $50, so that even if somebody gets fined, they wouldn't necessarily get it a second time, and so then that's $50, and especially a commercial outfit, that's cheaper to pay the fine than it is to hire somebody to actually do the work. And that's like absolutely facts, right? Like it's definitely cheaper to pay the fine than to hire somebody to do the work. And so they found that very problematic, and similarly problematic the process of giving a warning first before the fine and how that resets every year, and especially for commercial frequent offenders, that the suggestion that maybe it shouldn't reset every year, because it is frequently the same people over and over and over, or the same companies over and over and over, who never deal with their snow. And, you know, personally, I also see that happening, and it was especially, I think that there are some places that have done a lot better this last year. I know the administration and the departments have been working hard on advertising, making sure people are aware of their responsibility, and so I've definitely seen some improvement, but it's still kind of like scattershot in terms of, I mean, if everybody has done their sidewalk except for one person, then it still ends up being a blockage, being a problem, and yeah.
Thank you. Okay.
I would
And then Casey.
say, in general, one of my constituents complains about just how dangerous it is, and way more dangerous than walking on a sidewalk regularly, which can also be a little dangerous. Just the idea that it pushes pedestrians into the streets, and that's very scary, because the streets are also normally smaller width lanes. And then maybe it's just the curb ramp is what it's called, but I don't necessarily think residents are aware that that might be their piece of the sidewalk to cover. So or to shovel. So even if they clear it too, the plows are a problem on regular streets at all intersections, and those tend to stick around way longer even after a sidewalk is cleared. And then I would say I have a neighbor that plows a pedestrian area that abuts a private lot that gets plowed, and that private lot then plows all of its snow into our pedestrian connection to the beeline. So there's a problem with like where private or like commercial properties are putting their snow that has, that is an obstacle for pedestrians.
Oh, I'm sorry, Casey. Yeah, you were next.
I just wanted to say first, that's called a curb cut. But one piece of feedback that I've gotten from other CCA members, I'm not able to drive, but many of them do, and they drive accessible vehicles. And one of the difficulties, especially in city lots, is that the city will clear the lot and they put the snow in the handicap parking because it's at the back, usually. But the problem is that in these lots, I believe under the ADA, it is that for every 12 regular spots, you have one ADA spot, or either one ADA spot or one van spot. I have to look that up. But essentially, there's way more regular spots, yet somehow the snow always ends up in the accessible ones. And those are already extremely limited. So I feel like we need to come up with a different solution for that. And also on the street, because they often push the snow into the parking, that the accessible parking is prioritized to be cleared before the regular parking. Because again, there's a lot less of it. But that's one of the comments that I've received.
Yeah, great, thank you. Steve?
It does seem like there's, we've also seen this issue with a frequent critic of public works when a new building is being built and they don't make room for a sidewalk, or they let the construction take up the sidewalk. It seems like the priority is the accessibility of snowplows rather than the accessibility of everybody else. In other words, we'll only see the snow plowed that is easiest for the snowplow to push, and whatever snowplow we have, that's how the roads get cleared. And certainly there's no thought about prioritizing sidewalks at the same level as streets. So, I mean, I think, who was it who said earlier, maybe it was Dave, who said that when we replace equipment, we should be thinking about a wider variety of tools than just the big old truck that we can move the most snow with. Because they're moving, they don't prioritize handicap spaces. They should be covering up the non-disabled spaces in a parking lot. So even there, their thoughts are what's easiest for my truck to do.
Other, yeah, please.
I just wanted to add, I forgot to mention bus stops, because one of the other things was, if somebody usually bicycles or walks after a snow event, especially a major one, often then looking for a different transportation solution, but the bus stops also become completely inaccessible. And I'm not sure that there's any solution for that at all that's been tried. I'm not sure that BT is thinking about ways to like shovel out their bus stops, or in terms of, I'm not sure who would be responsible for that. Mm-hmm. If the stop, say, is in front of an apartment complex, the apartment complex, maybe they're supposed to do the sidewalk, but then the bus stop is here, and then there's the little sidewalk that goes to the street for people to actually get on the bus. So I don't know who is responsible for that technically, but I don't think anybody's doing it.
Steve?
There is one more thing that I know that people have a question about, which is when are they obligated to start shoveling? So it's within 24 hours of the last snowfall, but because the snow can keep falling, it can be unpredictable, and there's no clear signal. The city, for example, does trick-or-treat hours. They announce when it's safe to go out. Maybe if there was some signal, I mean, we know that the plow drives are out there. They have a protocol for tackling the snow. Maybe, the city could announce some kind of a time by which you're supposed to, like, based on the weather, make it official so that people are more likely to start shoveling.
Thank you. Any other thoughts from things that we've all heard from constituents or our constituency about challenges? Anything from the parks? Casey, please go ahead.
I wanted to ask, who is responsible for the sidewalks that branch off of the Beeline, for example, at College and 3rd and Madison at 3rd? Because often these branch offs are not touched, and there are businesses along there, but I know at Madison and 3rd, the business that's there is abandoned, and when I contacted the realtor for the building, he said, oh, I contacted the owner, but the owner didn't really care. And these pathways are how people, pedestrians and people with disabilities, get up to the Beeline. So who is responsible for those?
Good question. I can, the adjacent property owner typically, so 3rd and College, there's a building owned by the City Redevelopment Commission and by the Capital Improvement Board or county, maybe.
Or convention center.
County government convention center, yeah, exactly. And so those are both public entities at that particular place. But sometimes I've also observed and had constituents report to me, that sometimes there seems to be a kind of figuratively last mile, but in reality, like last 10 feet kind of gap where this happened at First Street in the Beeline this year and maybe some other Beeline crossings as well, where the property owner on, I think, whoever was doing it on First, both east and west of the Beeline on the south side of the street did, those sidewalks were cleared, but they stopped about 5 or 10 feet short of the Beeline. The Beeline was cleared, but then there's just this gap people are trudging through. So that's kind of related to something that Kate brought up too about people not knowing quite where their responsibility ends, quote unquote. And even, that's a question maybe that you could opine on, Tim, and any other feedback you all have heard. Yeah.
Yeah, obviously the last year, both of the last years we've had very extreme winter weather for us in terms of, would we have 15 inches in a couple of days this past year, I think, and subsequent storms, and about the same the year before. So it's very hard to know what to prepare for in Indiana. Are we going to get a year where we have 2 inches of light slush for the whole winter, or are we going to get what we've had the last 2 years, where not only does it snow heavily, but the temp drops And if removal isn't done quickly, that stuff hardens into something very difficult to remove, which I think has been the situation both of the last years. I will try to focus mostly on parks, but I have conversations about all of this as well with Director Wason and others as we talk about this and strategy in the winter. Obviously there's the U reports start flying as soon as the snow starts flying practically. And as you mentioned, I know HAND is very complaint driven in how they can respond, and figuring out that clock, as Steve said, I think is something that's kind of tricky to say exactly when did it stop snowing. Positive feedback that we receive from residents is about, getting trails, and we prioritize the main trails first, facility access, and then secondary trails like going around Bryan Park, things like that. The nice thing about plowing those trails is we're plowing those with specialty smaller equipment, and you're not generally competing with what is happening on the road, so the road gets plowed, it pushes it up onto the monolithic sidewalks. The beeline, at least, we can provide a really good transportation avenue for a lot of people without competing with road snow coming back in. And I think what may happen at a lot of those places that you're talking about, the last 10 feet, is just the order of operations, right? Like every time someone goes back through and does something, it pushes it opposite 90 degrees to where the path was before, right? So it's kind of a constant, not competition, but ongoing saga of maybe we clear the beeline and it's looking really good, and then roads get plowed again, and then all of a sudden all of the road access, curb cuts, et cetera, get covered up with the layer of slush again, or it melts and refreezes across it. So it's just, I think it'll be hard to find a perfect solution. I think looking for ways to do things better is really admirable, and we can engage with that, but there's always going to be a little bit of battling with the order of operations and how to get it just right, with every storm being so unique and different too.
Thank you. And I'll also echo that positive feedback I've heard from constituents with the beeline in particular and the promptness with which that gets cleared. Dave?
I was just looking at the municipal code 6.07.010, and it starts by saying that it's the duty of every owner of any premises abutting sidewalk to remove the snow, but all of the snow from the sidewalk. And I just wondered, is that something that, is there the discretion of the enforcement person to, it's pretty rare that you see all the snow removed from a sidewalk in its entirety, however important that would be for accessibility. Could you comment on that? Is this something that's we need to refine in some way? On the one hand, I want it to be accessible for everybody.
Right.
And you've got people that need to pass each other, especially. And then you've got with people with accessibility issues and things like that. But yet, is it practical? I don't know. Is it what's your experience, Tim?
I was thinking about that as we looked at the code too. It says, I think generally 36 inches is the width at which you should have it, right? But in the downtown, it's 54, and I don't know if that's defined to being, was that just curb cuts or 54, or was that everything was 54?
It's everything.
Everything?
So
path. Something to consider there too, maybe how quickly, do you get to that full 54? Because when you get that 11 to 15 inches, which is, again, I don't expect that we're going to get that every year, but who knows with the way our weather patterns go. You very quickly run out of places to physically put the snow, and that's why this past year they had to come into the square and downtown and things like that and mobilize. I know CBU actually mobilized equipment this past year to come and take and load snow and take it away. Because, unlike an East Coast city, we don't have a melter, we don't have they have those rolling dumpsters that you can melt the snow in and stuff like that.
So they use like front loaders or something?
They did. They used front loaders in this past storm, but obviously that took time to come in, because there was just too much snow everywhere, and there's only limited places to put it. So that ended up being a mitigation effort, but I know that took days of CBU being out there and helping out and loading that snow out. But it took time.
Okay, so we're getting into some questions around kind of departmental operations and some of the feedback we got there, particularly with enforcement, which we'll get to with a hand. So maybe it's a good time to move beyond kind of our experience with constituent feedback to two other items here. One I wanted to share, which is really just the packet addendum that came out this evening for folks to review. I exported the 404 U reports in the category sidewalk snow removal for winter of this year and just ran it through an AI assistant to analyze the data and report on trends. So that is in the packet. I think it largely aligns with what we're hearing. I'm not going to cover that at a high level or in detail rather, but y'all can look at that. I think I did ask it to identify kind of opportunities and what's going well and you know the positives in this. And so it has some of that framing in terms of what we can leverage that's successful. But yeah, the issues are the ones we've talked about. Transit access or bus stop access is a big one. Intersections in particular as a challenge, and snowbanks blocking access, uneven enforcement. And that's some of this is this is residents reporting, so it's a kind of perception thing. So concerns about lack of enforcement, uneven enforcement, complaints that have been made, and still sidewalks not being clear. So this kind of chronic noncompliance type of issue. Folks raising major pedestrian corridors and areas around schools as particular issues. So yeah, that's worth a browse if you hadn't already, because it helps synthesize a pretty extensive amount of user experience data that we have that might further help inform some opportunities for improvements, as well as what's going best. So the other thing I wanted to invite here is just if we have any public comment, either online or here in chambers, about people's personal experience as a pedestrian or in the pedestrian context with snow removal. So that could be about your own responsibility to clear snow from a property. It could be about, your experience moving through the city as a pedestrian, whatever else comes to mind. So with that, we could open it up for a short public comment on this particular topic of people's experience with pedestrian safety and accessibility and snow removals. Do we have anybody in chambers that wants to comment on that specifically? Please go ahead and walk up to the table.
Here?
Oh, yeah, the table's great. I think we should probably have signed in, so if you want to just sign in on the podium there and then take a seat at the table, we just invite a comment. We can cap that at 3 minutes, and I can keep a timer, and if you wanted to introduce yourself, and then go ahead.
Thank you. My name is James Ford, and you've already talked about a bunch of the things I wanted to hear about, but there's a couple things you didn't mention. The alleys in my neighborhood are an issue because they don't typically get plowed, but the sidewalks will stop at an alley and next sidewalk will start at an alley, and if the people are being responsible by shoveling their own sidewalks, they're not shoveling the alley, and the alley's not being plowed. So even if the street's plowed and the alley's not, there's a big mound of snow right in the middle between the intersections. And typically the alleys are not ADA compliant anyway, and there's awful crumbling sidewalk or crumbling asphalt there. So I would like somebody to at least think about alleys as an issue for people who have difficulty getting around. There is one issue about, I think it was just touched on by Mr. Rollo. There's an property owner in our neighborhood who has built in his lease that says the tenants are responsible for the snow removal. Now, sometimes tenants are young people who've never shoveled snow before, and to tell them, oh, you need to shovel your snow, and I'm not going to even give you a shovel, then they don't get shoveled, and then who gets fined? Do you fine the student who didn't do their shoveling, or do you fine the owner? So I think that maybe there should be some sort of proscription against forcing the tenants to be the shovelers, and that it should be the responsibility of the property owner. We do have repeat offenders that rely on the fact that their first warning every year is not going to be a fine, and so then they just don't do it that first time. And then there's the repeat offenders who will shovel a single shovel width down, and it's hard to, even with one person, to get down that little path. One side thing, I think it would be, I think Hand is awfully busy, and it would be helpful for them if they would have a person who was maybe a coordinator of volunteers for the neighborhoods, so that if each neighborhood had a volunteer who could report to the volunteer coordinator, say, this is an issue, rather than having to send Hand employees out to the neighborhoods, they could just be having somebody in Hand office receiving information from a neighborhood volunteer saying, we've got a big problem here, or we're okay here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Do we have anybody online who would like to comment? No? All right, thank you. And here in chambers, I think we have the sign-in sheet at the table now, so you can just go ahead and.
Hello.
You'll have 3 minutes once you're ready to.
Yes, I'm Zach Ammerman. I'm just wanted to comment basically, anecdotally, I live in an apartment building that's managed by one of the largest apartment owners in the city, and they never came at all during the major snowstorm. I went out and shoveled like a makeshift path just so I could get out with my dog. I went around and I personally shoveled all the way around 2 buildings that have 4 units each, and shoveled a path just to have a makeshift path for people, and nobody ever came from the apartment building despite us calling and asking, and I understand they're busy because it's a crazy snowstorm, but I think that is representative of a large number of things happening in the city. Large apartment units are just eating the fine because it's a $50 fine per property, I think. That's not sufficient. It needs to be, I would really like for you guys, if you can, to look at enforcement, particularly for apartment buildings. It should be a fine per unit. It should escalate faster for apartment buildings and HOAs, for example, too. And it should be higher for apartment buildings. That's the main thing. I really think there's an easy way to do that so you're not hitting single-family residents that hard, but you're getting enforcement. I think that would have a lot of bang for its buck, basically. Yeah, so that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Anyone else here in the chambers want to comment on their experience with, we'll be back in a moment, Casey, or if you want to,
If there's others, you can.
oh yeah, go ahead, please, if you'd like to sign in, you'll have 3 minutes.
Yeah, on the topic of snow, you know, I plowed snow for 37 years at the street department, and man, it's a no-win situation. Every snow is different, every year is different, and them guys do a great job, and they really put their heart, and they risk their lives when they get in them trucks, right? They risk their lives, and I appreciate it. I've been retired for 4 years, and that last snow we got, the one that had like 15 or 18 inches, that was incredible. I went out with my rubber boots, and it was all the way to the top, and I thought, man, them guys got to be tough. Them guys are badass. Excuse my language. Right, okay. But they're really good guys. But I want to bring something else up, too. I don't know if it's the proper time or place, but, you know, a virtual tour. I was coming down Adams Street yesterday. Of course, you know, virtual. And I turned on 6th Street, and boy, by the time I knew it, there was a police officer behind me. Come out of nowhere. I thought, okay, cool. And they come up the alley. And got right behind me, lights flashing. I said, oh boy, what, you know, okay. I kind of knew what I'd done. Right. And she was really cool. She is very understanding. Could have wrote me a couple of big fat tickets, but didn't. Her Officer Ashtabella, I asked him a while ago who she was. He told me about it. But I really appreciated that. Them's the kind of police officers we need that gives you a break, because I don't want to go to Don's Insurance next week and say, hey, how much owe you? And he gets them tickets. I get them tickets. Man, my insurance will go sky high. But she didn't give me one, and I greatly appreciate that, man. But I really had plans on coming here tonight and complaining about a few things, but I'm going to wait for another time. There was a time and a place for everything. But I really want to compliment the police for giving me a break, man. I appreciate it. And God bless America.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your comments and for your recognition of staff
Hey, no
and their
problem.
hard work. Yeah.
No problem.
Any other public comment online? Okay, I think that would conclude then this portion of kind of feedback. So the next part of the agenda is really kind of talking about the feedback from departments. Tried to tailor some questions to Parks, Public Works, and Planning that were unique to their purview and responsibility. Maybe we actually just want to start with Parks, and I don't have to cover it since we have Tim here with us. So maybe you just want to kind of give an overview of, your feedback that you shared with me and the Parks responsibility and kind of what's going well, where you see opportunities for improvement, and then we can have any questions folks have.
Sure. Hopefully I remember everything I wrote because I don't have it in front of me right now. I would just say, in terms of parks, what we are responsible for is primarily our facilities. So oftentimes we're having to make a call about our facilities being open or closed, things like the Twin Lakes Rec Center, other places that people go to recreate or have events. And then we have sort of a priority list that we hit during a snow event. Typically when we get an inch or more is when we activate. If it's less than an inch, we don't necessarily do a full activation of our snow removal protocol. The beeline is sort of the champion priority of all the priorities that we have, just because it is such, a recreation and transportation artery for the city. And because if we get that plowed, then that can provide a safe alternative to example, College and Walnut sidewalks, which are going to deal with monolithic snow getting pushed up issues, and provide that basically same north-south access. From there, it's about other parks properties, starting again with access to the property is the priority, and then we work our way in, starting with more major trails, including secondary trails, Jackson Creek Trail, Clear Creek Trail, Holly Grimshaw Trail is another one that is important for transportation as well, especially to campus from the east side. So those are sort of the secondary priorities. Rail trail, we can't really plow because it's soft surface. This time we actually did end up doing a little bit to it just to make it lower and a little more attainable to people, but it is not always plowed. Things that are going well, yeah, I think we have overall a good understanding, a good system with Public Works. I saw some questions about, multi-use trails versus paths, and I think Adam summed it up well. He said, while the public may not always understand where the responsibilities start and end between Public Works and Parks, we typically do, and that is that Public Works is generally responsible for multi-use paths, the definition being a path goes along a road. When we do the trails, which the trails are generally not along a road, they go separate from a road. So that's generally our area of delineation. I think, yeah, as we mentioned, we've heard a lot of positive feedback about the beeline, about in general, this past storm. I also just heard a lot of positive feedback from residents in general about how appreciative they were of having clear places to take their dogs to walk and to get to the grocery store or Kroger or on the beeline, for example. Things like that, and just how important it was to have in the midst of a lot of uncertainty and maybe my neighbors have plowed their sidewalk, maybe there's a missing section in my neighborhood, I can get all the way there except for this one house that hasn't done it. To have the reliability of some of the trail and access options, I think is going well. Challenges again, yeah, just the mixed nature of it from time to time, that it's I think it's right that it's never the same twice.
Thank you. Questions for Tim? Yeah, Kate and then Steve.
I was just looking at the GIS. A beeline question. I do think it is awesome that the beeline gets nowadays, so the priority of it, I think I'm appreciative of that. If property lines, like do you as parks do the sidewalks that are part of the beeline property itself? So because the park is like probably I don't know what that might be, 10 feet on both sides of the beeline? And because who would be responsible for that, actually?
That's a great question. Yeah, that gets at kind of what I think you were talking about, that last 5 to 10 feet. I'd actually need to check in with our, there's more or less 2 people that end up being responsible for the beeline snow removal up and down. That would be a good point that I could follow up and clarify with.
I was going to ask, how does Parks track how much plowing is done? Do you have real-time info? Do plowers report to you what they did? How quickly do you get that kind of data back if you track it at all?
Not very officially. Basically, we know, and I think I kind of said some napkin math is, we have about 20 union employees in our operations division and a couple others in other divisions who, when we get a major snowfall event, it's their day, right? And maybe their day and more if we're getting into overtime. When we get into overtime, we can track that pretty easily, overtime related to snow removal events. So no, we haven't really done a concerted effort to track specific hours.
Well, the reason I ask is because in both your case and Public Works' case, if you could track, segments that are cleared, it would be the beginning of a modest database that would allow us to expand over time. If we knew how much 20 union people could do in one day, if we get a baseline sense of it. And I don't want to create an excessive burden of work, but if you're clearing the Polygrimshaw Trail from X point to Y point, and that's a standard thing that somebody does, they can report in that they've done that, and there can be, we can get a sense of what the city is currently capable of. And that would allow us to measure what Public Works can do, and then what maybe we can, there's no data, and that data of hours spent doesn't really help. We need to kind of know how linear feet cleared. So I didn't know how much of a burden that would be, do you think, for your staff to, is there a way to operationalize that?
There may be through something like CityWorks, where I haven't really thought about this too much. I'd have to check with the GIS department, but some GIS tracking or things like that. We use that in other applications. For example, like weed wrangles and pesticide application, we'll do GIS tracks. So there may be a way we could do some similar like GIS tracking for snow removal.
Also, are all the vehicles that are used to move snow, are they four-wheeled? Are there any hand plows? Like,
Yes.
What's the diversity that you use to clear trails?
For the Parks Department, it's everything from full-size pickup trucks with blades, some UTVs that have different attachments, either a snow pusher or there's one that's like a broom for when it's like a lighter, fluffy snow. Down to hand shoveling, down to snow blowers, and a few other things in between I'm not thinking of probably.
I feel like this is the kind of thing that would be the subject of a Transportation Commission inquiry, where we don't know anything enough, and we don't even know whether to recommend a resolution at the commission. We're looking for. So it'd be interesting for us to work with you to see if we can find a system that doesn't put you all out while you're doing work. Thanks.
Other questions here? Feedback for Tim? Go ahead. Oh.
Yeah, I think that my question is kind of on the vein of what Steve was just asking about is, the question was how long does it take for you to clear? Which of course, it depends on the snowfall. Mm-hmm. And you said like it takes, your 20 workers like a day, but like say if we get, 6 inches of snow, how long does it take for you to clear like all of the things that you're responsible for clearing? Is that like a single day of work? Is that like a day and a half? Do you just have them work overtime until they're done? Like if this happens on a Saturday, like do you call folks in on Sunday in order to get that done in terms of Yeah, and it's kind of a similar question, I guess, but it's also that idea of how much different departments can help each other, because how much you can help each other sort of depends on how long it takes you to do the things that you're actually responsible for.
And I think one of the challenges there is what you've hit on, is it's what's the nature of it? Is it 5 wet inches? Is it 5 dry inches? Is it to the point where we say, there's so much snow, go out and do your first pass, at least get a first pass in, understanding we're adjusting the quality of the job based on the quantity of the snow sometimes, right? Like, it's still coming down, we're gonna go hit a first pass. We're gonna have to do it again later, we're gonna make it better, but at least there's a first pass in. So, hard to answer, but I do think there might be some applications of GIS where we could just start a track and get a little bit of interesting data.
In terms of how it's written in code with the requirement of the removal within 24 hours after the snow stops falling, is that accessible for your department to do?
I would say mini snowstorms, yes, but for example, and I think same thing for Public Works, this 15-inch snowstorm last time, no. Within 24 hours, could we get everything 54 inches? Could we do all of that? For the reasons we talked about before, no. Just because there was so much snow being pushed around and limited places to put it, and just a finite amount of labor and overtime to commit towards it, that it just necessarily took more time to get to the final standards that we wanted.
Okay.
I have a question that isn't directly for parks, but you might know, which is, I asked Public Works if they were responsible for like all city-owned properties besides parks properties, and the answer was no. And so Parks does parks facilities, Public Works does Public Works facilities. There are other city entities like the Redevelopment Commission or just others that have property, CBU. So every department is essentially responsible for its own snow removal, and did they all do that in-house or some contract for it? Do you know that?
I believe CBU takes care of their own for their facilities. I feel pretty confident about that. I don't know about the RDC. I believe there may be precedent for some contractual removal at RDC, but I'm not positive, and I would defer that back to Anna or to Adam to give a definitive answer.
Yeah, that's one where we had a gap, at least one gap, with the College Square property this last cycle. So it's helpful to know that that's not Public Works' responsibility, and that maybe it's a ball that's gotten dropped with RDC. Other questions or feedback for Tim? Casey, please.
You mentioned the issue with shoveling 36 inches versus 54, and how long does that take depending on the amount of snowfall. I'm wondering if it might be beneficial to the city to build a sort of policy that says within X amount of 24 hours or 48 hours of a snowfall, it needs to be at 36 inches. And then, at 72 to 96 hours, we go to maybe 45 inches. And then further out, we go to the full 54 in order to give the city time to deal with the amount of snow.
Yeah.
But still keep it safe for the pedestrians.
I think that sounds very reasonable. I think the challenge is just always going to be putting a specific time limit, not knowing what the conditions are, and knowing that, I think all departments, I know Public Works, they get after it. They do everything they can to get it clear, including the Brighton B-Town crew that does the downtown ramps, and, we collaborate and try to help out, and cross departments, we'll see something that needs to be done, we'll try to help, but I just don't know how you could get a sort of time limit that would work across the board. I guess that's the challenge with private enforcement too, right? But
maybe that is a good lead-in to hand as the next part we're going to talk about, because it gets into the enforcement context. It seems like some discretion is necessary around that type of thing, but it's a little bit tricky to spell it out. So we still need standards that are kind of the default, but then some ability to have some discretion around enforcement. Interestingly, so the questions that Director Killian Hansen answered, she mentioned, I think, a process of issuing warnings first, which is actually not what's in code. Code says if we determine there's a violation, the person shall issue a notice of violation. And so I actually don't think that discretion that's being exercised currently is in code, but I think some kind of discretion is probably warranted. But I mean, there's also an appeals process that's defined in code, which we didn't talk about earlier, though it's quite a quick turnaround, like 7 days. You have to like notify the Board of Public Works in writing that you're appealing, which might be a little onerous. Yeah, so hand, that, the overall theme was that enforcement is a real challenge for the Housing and Neighborhood Development Department. That ranges from staffing, the folks who do the apartment inspections and certification are the folks who are doing the enforcement on failure to remove snow from sidewalks. So they're already kind of like overworked and limited in their ability to get to it. There are operational challenges around like the time it takes. She mentioned the 24-hour window thing, and when to start enforcing is kind of like a barrier. They're getting a lot of complaints. They can't do anything about them yet. That often snow is melting before they get around to issuing the citation, things like that. She did note that there were 275 complaints and 307 citations, which I was a little surprised to hear. I just assumed there would be there would be fewer citations relative to the complaints. I did identify 400 plus complaints in the snow removal category for this past winter. So I'm not sure what the source of discrepancy is there, but those were sort of the major themes, at least that I read in the answers from hand. Do folks have questions that we want to? I kind of anticipate having follow-up conversation with the department heads, and so do folks have questions they are still seeking answers to, or reactions or feedback to ideas that were spurred by what the department heads shared? So at hand in this case, Steve.
What was Dave and Andy? What was the term for when we wanted apartment buildings to not have one hookup, but a hookup for every unit? What was that?
The whole Scott Wells master meter loophole thing.
Yeah, what was that? What's the word for that? Concurrency, is that it? Was it called, did we call it concurrency? Where the point was just that what the gentleman said about fining per unit as opposed to, or at least per linear foot.
Per linear foot, yeah.
Yeah, that is a loophole. It's a big loophole, and that any new policy ought to address density. At the very least, for a larger property that has more linear feet, that maybe ought to be a concern. The number of people crossing, on a sidewalk like that. But for an apartment building, that's a reasonable thing that I think that ought to make its way into a new policy. The other thing is just, I'm even more now, I feel like, especially if it's somebody in parks. I don't know if there's a meteorologist on your staff or anybody who tracks, but if there was an official city announcement of how much snow was falling, I think there's more than one class of snowfall, but at 3 inches or below, it's this kind of fine, and at 6 inches or below, it's this kind of fine, or if the temperature goes above 32 degrees, we have to find some way to classify the amount of snow that's fallen that's practical, but that recognizes that not all snow is the same. Maybe we don't need to worry if it's less than an inch. Maybe we need to give people more time if it's more than a foot, stuff like that. Those are just some thoughts that are coming to me. Mm-hmm. I think that the commission, the Transportation Commission, would will have a great interest in helping research this issue and working with planning and park staff and public works to deliberate over this if the council wants it.
Other questions or reactions to the hand? Yeah, Isabel, then Hopi.
Well, first of all, just to clarify, so for an apartment building, the Bloomington Municipal Code only applies to the sidewalk in front of the building, the public right-of-way, so not, there's no enforcement mechanism if they don't clear their parking lot, unfortunately. Another point I wanted to bring up is, according to the numbers that Anna Killian Hansen provided, where there was, 370 citations and, what was it?
307 citations, she said, I think.
370.
Oh, my bad. That's, yeah, transcription errors.
And 275 U reports. So that implies there was some proactive monitoring, I guess.
Or escalating fines. We did have snow that stuck around for weeks,
Yeah.
and if people aren't responsive. I'm a little unclear about that. That's something to clarify.
So I guess I would like
Yeah.
to know if there is any proactive monitoring of, maybe large properties, make sure sidewalks are clear downtown. I don't know if they have the capacity to do any proactive monitoring, but that might be a question.
Hopi?
Yeah, thank you. So one of the things that I wondered when I read this, and it actually related also to something that one of the members of the public said about the rental properties and who's responsible for snow removal. And my thought, honestly, was that we should just always make the owner responsible in terms of the fine, and that it's their responsibility that if they expect their tenant to, that they're going to pass that fine on to their tenant if their tenant doesn't do what it is that's in their lease agreement. So maybe putting that specifically into code could help relieve that lack of clarity for hand in terms of issuing those citations. That was one of the things that I wondered. I also wondered, so this was a question maybe that you can, I think you're writing down questions for department heads, great. Whether hand began proactively monitoring forecasted storm systems and then rescheduling inspections. And so I was wondering if that change in monitoring resulted in more ticketing, more compliance generally, whether they managed to issue more fines. I'm definitely interested in that question that Isabel brought up in terms of what does that 370 mean? Is that 370 $50 fines? Did we actually, was there any revenue generated from fines specifically related to snow removal? And I would similarly be interested in terms of how much we charge for that. I mean, there is staff time associated with having to go out and ticket and wanting to make sure that our fines are appropriate for the staff time that gets used. And I'm not quite sure how long that fine of $50 has been there, but I think it's been a really long time.
Yeah.
And there have been lots of increases in all sorts of things, including staff salaries. So I think that it's really appropriate to increase that. And then my last thought was wondering whether city staff from outside of the hand department, whether they could be trained to help hand during these especially large events in terms of addressing the U reports, writing citations, like checking to verify, especially thinking about some of our staff members who are already out in those weather. So it's not like a member of the hand department is having to drive over somewhere when, maybe a police officer who's already, going through that neighborhood can drive by and take a quick photo and send it, or sanitation.
Parking enforcement.
Parking enforcement. Like, I think that it just kind of brainstorming to wonder whether there are other ways that we could utilize other departments to support hand in some of that, even like plow drivers, because they're out, especially with the large events like this time. I mean, they went over and over and over to improve things, and whether those staff members could ever be utilized in any way to support the hand department.
Steve?
It would also be interesting to find out the protocol that parking enforcement uses when there's snow on the ground. At a certain point, they can't enforce the meters because they can't be seen. or they can't be accessed. So it would be interesting to find out what they know, but I absolutely want to chime in on the idea that when they can't enforce meters, they can and should be helping remove snow, or at least identifying how it's being done.
I think that one's promising. Tim?
I'll just throw out one, as I'm thinking about timing of storms and severity of storms, one metric that might be available out there that you could look at tying something to is the travel advisory status, because that is something that is subjective but is set at certain times, and could also dictate what level of staff response is even appropriate at a given time, based on the severity of the storm and the travel status.
Yeah. Kate and then Isabel.
I was wondering about a couple things. One, how we have that reset every year that you can get a warning, and let's question the warning. But for other infractions or citations, we sometimes do a 3-year. So would we want a longer period? You know, we have, I think with the conditional duplexes right now, if you have like any citations or infractions for the last 3 years also, you can't build a conditional duplex. And I don't know if we would want to look at putting something like this in that list of, like, if you don't clear sidewalks, then you will be added to this list and you cannot participate like everyone else, kind of thing. Because I think it is that big of a deal that we need our sidewalks cleared, you know? Another one I thought of is not using other hand staff, but honestly doing like a temp agency for snow events, because it is so random, and temp agencies do that, like emergency staffing, where either for citations or, I mean, I was really wondering too if there's any way to do a citation / a removal service that then they get billed for the snow removal off of their sidewalk. I don't know if you heard that, but just because a citation doesn't fix the problem that people can't get through in the snow, that I consider like an urgent emergency. Like if sidewalks aren't accessible, like, them getting a $50 fine or $150 fine it does not fix the problem. And I think too about, it's such a wacky thing that snow events happen, and that even like property owners can normally clear it, but they might be on vacation, right? And they might not have a backup. And I'm not saying they shouldn't, but it's like they might have just been like, I never thought about hiring someone, you know, like someone's checking my mail, but I didn't think about like snow removal. And it's just like, there's just so much to consider. And then if someone gets cited while they are out of town, they might not do anything about it, and so then people can't get through still. So I would love to even look at a fee for service. If you don't get it done yourself, we are doing it and we're charging you.
Isabel, and then maybe we should move on. Also, just a reminder, we do have a section about solutions, so this is a little bit more about questions for hand and clarifying anything from them, but we'll talk about specific issues and potential solutions too. It's all good, but yeah.
Well, in Adam Weisson's replies, you know, the Public Works Department did a pilot where they cleared snow off of some sidewalks downtown. And I think he said they were having a hard time even finding private contractors to do that work. So it may not, I mean, maybe this will spur entrepreneurship, I don't know, but if we're going to, you know, move to billing people for actual snow removal, then we need to look at how much snow removal capacity our community has. But I was actually going to say, I would want to ask Hand and people who do the enforcement what they would think about, well, maybe it's not actually for them to decide, probably for us to decide, but I'm contemplating a distinction in fine structure between, either between a single house, whether it's rental or owned, and commercial property, which would include apartment buildings, businesses, et cetera, car dealerships, et cetera. Or make the fine based on linear feet of sidewalk. I mean, it's a huge difference if, you know, I don't clear in front of my little 50-foot right-of-way in front of my house, or the Ford dealership on South Walnut, which is, you know, quarter mile long, doesn't clear their sidewalk. So I think we need to think about some distinctions there. Sorry, I'm probably
That's okay.
getting into
No, that's
some
okay.
issues.
Inevitably, this is a little bit, I was just noting that we do have an additional agenda portion. So maybe we move into Public Works, just by way of summary. Is there a final thing on hand?
Yeah, it's actually kind of a question also from a constituent who mentioned the idea of neighborhood volunteers to help do the reporting, and I'm wondering if that would be at all practical, because then, I mean, I think in some ways it might make it easier if there's a single point of contact, as opposed to, you know, lots of people.
Okay, thank you. So Public Works, just by way of summary, they spend quite a lot on snow removal generally, a lot on equipment or materials. Looked like $700K plus. We do have $50K that they have used to pilot some things, and they did a monolithic sidewalks on College Walnut Corridor between First Street and Winslow, including carrying snow away. That might have also applied to the downtown curb ramps that the DPW Brighton Bloomington crews worked on. So those were kind of some of the pilot things. Those might have both been covered in the 50K. It seemed to me like the College Walnut Corridor one was maybe not worth the effort. It was very difficult, and that actually probably isn't, like, it was hard for them to be effective. They were like repeatedly hauling snow away. It was a lot of money out of a very small area that actually probably doesn't have very high pedestrian use. And so I'm curious about, like, it is a monolithic sidewalk issue, but, like, might we be better served by, like, having them just target curb ramps in, like, the high pedestrian use areas or something like that. So that was an interesting report on kind of like how it's going. Clarifying that multi-use paths and public works facilities are what they clear. They feel clear on responsibilities vis-a-vis parks, maybe less so, that confident that residents are clear. Just anecdotally, an example I'll share, like, I know New Hope for Families, like the multi-use path in front of their building along Patterson there, like their portion was cleared. I'm guessing they did that because the other portions of the multi-use path were not cleared for the entire duration of the previous snowstorm. So it seems like maybe that was like a gap in what was on Public Works radar, but then also residents maybe not being sure about whether they had to clear or not. And so it does seem like there's some ambiguities there to resolve. Adam highlighted just how hard the folks on street work, that they feel good about their activation and their responsibilities generally. Noted they have challenges with equipment, especially with relation to protected bike lanes. I don't know, I'd be curious, Tim, if you all share equipment at all, if they have any equipment that is like yours for smaller spaces like protected bike lanes, which we're having more of over time. He also mentioned challenges with curb ramps, monolithic sidewalks, of course, willing vendors for contracted services, and also the quality of their own facilities relative to the long hours worked. So maybe I'll start with you, Tim.
I do not know the answer to like what smaller equipment they're
Yeah.
potentially using on like the 7 line, for example.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that something that, I know that in interdepartment kind of like agreements around stuff can like exceed my understanding, but is that something where like sharing equipment across departments is viable, or is that something you don't
Yes,
normally do?
yeah, I mean, just potentially based on what it's being used for in its home department, right? But no, we do share stuff back and forth frequently
Okay.
as available.
Yeah. Thanks. Other reactions, questions for Public Works? Stacey? Casey, sorry.
I'm wondering, you talk about the equipment that we have here in Bloomington. Do you ever contact other cities outside of Bloomington to borrow equipment in major snow events?
We have not, no.
Would that be a potential solution?
Potential. I mean, if you could reach far enough away, I think that the challenge with most snowstorms is that they're regional. And so most of your regional partners, like, Columbus has helped us with storms in the past. But if we get a snowstorm, Columbus probably is too. So I don't know that there's much opportunity there for sharing unless you really knew there was a big storm coming and were able to have some type of mutual aid agreement with someone far away. Yeah.
Could that be something that the city looks into?
I don't know. I think it's a good question. Yeah.
Or so sharing with IU is another. I mean, they have loads of non-cloud infrastructure that they clear. So, that partnership opportunity. Other reactions or additional questions for Public Works? Areas for exploration.
I have a question that would be, do we have to clear every lane of wide streets? Like, do we need 3 lanes on Walnut during snow clearing, or could some of those resources, could we clear 1 lane on major streets like that, and then those resources be used elsewhere?
I had a question for them about the ability to, basically many of our streets are overbuilt or wider than they need to be, and is it possible to clear not very close, like 5 feet away from the monolithic sidewalk? So you're ending up with basically a pile of snow in the street, but nevertheless, enough room for cars to go. So that's a question I have.
Would it be possible with the clearing of the sidewalks to potentially use bike lanes? Because not many people are biking in the wintertime.
Well, some people are still trying, but as far as putting the snow, like storing the snow there?
Not necessarily storing it there, but if we're in the process of moving it out and we need to temporarily put it there while we're getting equipment, could that be a workable solution?
I think it's what's happening now, with maybe the exception of protected bike lanes, which I think they're trying to plow separately. But I think in general, where we just have striped bike lanes on a street, in practice, what's getting cleared probably mostly is like a drive lane that just becomes de facto shared. So I think some of that is happening. I'm not sure it's ideal, but other Public Works specific thoughts? Hopi?
I guess I want to second the confusion about what might count as a multi-use path and what might not. And there's a link in his report to the GIS snow remediation map, but then I have to log in to ArcGIS, and I don't know that I have an Esri account to be able to log in and see that. So, but I guess that would be a question, because I mean, if the sidewalk, excuse me, is wider out front, and you think maybe it's a multi-use path or maybe it's not a multi-use path, like, and is there a map somewhere for a resident to be able to see where all the multi-use paths are?
Yeah, good question. And for the department, or like reporting on that is something, like if they're tracking this already, is it something that could actually be reported on, if not to the council, maybe to the Transportation Commission or something like that?
Yeah.
One other thing I did speak with Adam on the phone earlier today, and he also mentioned their kind of sidewalk operations plan in development still, I think. They're still working on some sidewalk data things related to maintenance and accessibility gaps. But in his mind, this all kind of factored into that, and the Transportation Commission was also a natural partner on that, and that to the extent that some of the opportunities for improvements might be operational, resident education, reporting, things like that, and need not be codified, that their appearance in a plan and their, I guess, synergy with the Transportation Commission might be a good venue.
So just to clarify, municipal code only talks about sidewalks, not multi-use paths. So
That's
even
right.
a multi-use path that's along a street, like Rogers Street or Patterson or Grimes, like next to New Hope, they're not legally required to clear that.
I think,
The property owner, right?
yeah, I think that's right.
that's a gap.
Well, unless the city is in fact doing it all, the multi-use paths. They're probably easier to plow. Most of them are asphalt, not, you know.
But you just gave an example where they did.
Well, they didn't. That might have just been a failure of our own operational protocols, but that's a question for clarity, yeah. Unless there's any last comments on Public Works, I might just open it up for just a minute or two on planning and transportation. Their feedback was quite limited. And then maybe we can kind of go into these categories of solutions and talk through things. I'd like to keep us to around 8:30 to finish. Obviously, we've been workshopping and getting, you know, kind of solutions adjacent in some of the conversation already. Planning and transportation doesn't have a lot of direct responsibility in this, like Parks Hand or Public Works does. Nevertheless, you know, it's where the pedestrian and bicycle coordinator position is located. They administer Safe Streets for All, you know, and our comprehensive plan essentially. So the feedback from Director Hiddle was, again, relatively limited, kind of noted that some of the things he thought that were going well was using the high injury network where we are trying to prioritize pedestrian safety in particular as a lens through which to think about the limited public works dollars and where those can go for pedestrian routes. Monolithic sidewalks is a particular challenge, and just expense and logistics. So I don't think a lot to dig into there, but if people had specific questions for follow-up with planning, yeah.
Well, I guess this goes back to staff coordination, because I know that the Planning and Transportation Department also issues certain types of notices of violations, depending on what it is. Like, and so I wonder if that would be another good option for a department to help partner with Hand during these large snow events.
Yeah, it seems like one well-equipped person with the right software could just proactively monitor the high injury network and issue citations. Because right now it feels like we have a scattershot kind of reactive approach. Good question. Other planning-related observations or questions?
I was just going to point out that planning and transportation and engineering co-staff the Transportation Commission. This kind of inquiry would fall under the jurisdiction of planning. So in a way, I think maybe they're more a department that would help derive the solution as opposed, in other words, the coordination solution between departments, since planning is in their name. But I wouldn't expect them to try to do enforcement. I expect them to help coordinate a response between departments. So I think they would be very useful in that respect. And they will be actively discussing this issue when we bring it as an inquiry. They'll be part of that discussion, I think.
Tim, do you know of any, what interdepartmental discussion looks like on this particular issue? Is there anything standing or occurring, or is it yeah?
We have had periodic check-ins with like the GIS team to try to update that map that you're referencing. I was just looking for the link. I can't find it at the moment. That has been a typical ongoing thing to just try to clarify some of those, like, are we covering these things? You know, is there a gap? I'd say that happens probably once a year, but no other. I think this is the impetus for maybe other coordination, other than coordination during storms and phone calls and borrowing of equipment and things like that come up that was discussed.
Got it. Thank you. Any final observations or questions for planning before I move on to kind of talking about solutions more? All right, let's do it. So this next topic was really just me framing how I think about this a little bit. We've kind of got policy, budget, and operations. And so revisions to like the fine schedule, right, or responsibilities, those might be entering into actual policy, which is kind of squarely our purview, but, you know, to be done collaboratively. Budgetary, you know, the dollars we allocate for clearing pedestrian infrastructure, or addressing specific gaps like you know, curb cuts and curb ramps, staffing, resourcing, right, equipment needs, Director Wason mentioned, protected bike lanes, struggling with those, other staffing issues. So and then operational, that can range from, resident community outreach, other things people have been suggesting about how we conduct business, how we might collaborate or coordinate. And sometimes things are going to touch on multiple of those, but we are least probably suited to direct the operational pieces, but I think questions and recommendations can help. And so maybe these categories that I outlined are a little arbitrary. Maybe we can spend 8 or 10 minutes in each. Folks, it was some suggested topics that again surfaced as like these are particular issues that have been coming up again and again from resident feedback. And do people have specific ideas, potential solutions that they'd like us to look into as we pursue next steps on addressing some of these particular challenges? So in the network accessibility category, I listed like monolithic sidewalks, sidewalk clearance gaps, and just the high injury network in particular as maybe a focus area. Is this useful? Let me pause actually. Are these categories useful for discussing solutions, or do you just want to treat the whole list here as sort of like a, getting the juices flowing, talk about whatever you want for the next period? The latter?
Option 2.
Okay, let's do that. Great.
So for the bus stops, does Bloomington Transit, could they maybe take some responsibility for clearing bus stops? I mean, I know they're not set up for it, but they need to join the conversation about that, I think.
Do they do anything now? I don't even know. Yeah, good question.
Yeah, I similarly, did you talk to John Connell at all?
I did not.
In preparation for this? Okay.
The CCA has done a little bit of work with Bloomington Transit, and I've had conversations with Sean because we did a presentation for them about people with disabilities in the summer of, I believe, 2025. And one of the things that John said, because I brought up an anecdote about a winter when it had snowed, and I went to somewhere and the bus dropped me, but the sidewalk wasn't cleared and the bus stop wasn't cleared. And I asked the driver, where do I go for you to pick me back up? And they said, we can't pick you back up because we only pick up at the sidewalks and or at the bus stops. And when I brought that up, John happened to be in the room, and he brought it up that if a driver pulls up to a stop and it is not cleared, they are supposed to radio it in, from my understanding. And also that if they drop off a person who has disabilities somewhere other than a bus stop, then they need to radio that in so that alternative solutions can be made.
Yeah.
Because what I ultimately ended up having to do was call the transit office, and I said, how am I getting home? Because there's no sidewalks that connect to this building.
Yeah.
Major sidewalks. It was the FSSA building, which is a building that many people with disabilities have to interact with, and for various reasons. And what they ended up having to do was send a BT Access vehicle to come get me. But I'm not a BT Access user. So,
Yeah, that's very helpful. And sorry you experienced that, but thank you for the information. Yeah, Steve.
Her story is literally why you all created the makeup of the Transportation Commission. It includes John Connell. Often his deputy, Shelley Shermitis, is there for him, but he literally sits on the commission to address issues exactly like this. I am sure that when, if and when we deliberate on it, that would be a good place to do it, because he'll be there.
Other solutions, ideas?
And the TCA is on it too, Leslie.
Yeah, Leslie.
yes.
Davis, yeah.
I mean, I think a lot of this just points back to the kind of an overarching theme that we've had throughout the conversation, is that we don't have enough hands during these situations to help clear all of this snow to help each of these departments in their specific assigned areas. So I don't have a solution. I'm just saying I think that's one area that we need to focus on, and is how can we get more, whether it is temp help, more departmental pitch in, whatever that might look like. I think that's something that is probably going to have to be on the top of the list in order to get any of these solutions that we come up with handled.
I wanted to clarify, are we just talking about solutions for transit at this point? Or are we
No,
talking
really
about all solutions?
any of the things we've been talking about.
Okay. Going back to what we were talking about regarding the alleyways, I live in a complex where our garbage is in the alleyway, and many complexes are like that. And when we had the snow last winter, our trash was completely blocked, and nobody wanted to clear it because there's multiple buildings along that alleyway. And when I called my landlord to say, what do I do? Because it's actually written into our leases that if we don't take our trash out, our leases can be violated. They told me, you need to either ask a neighbor or get a caregiver, because we don't have a solution. And unfortunately for many people with disabilities like myself, we don't have caregivers and family members. And you may have a neighbor willing to help you, but not always. So I feel like there needs to be a solution from hand that says, if your complex garbage is in the alleyway, you have a responsibility to shovel every which way from your complex to, at minimum, your garbage to allow for sanitation to continue.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Do you know if it's served by a private sanitation company or the city of Bloomington sanitation? Not that that would necessarily make a difference. Usually 4 units or less is city of Bloomington, 5 units or more is like a private.
We'd be private.
Grumpke or Ada's or whatever. Okay, yeah, mine too. Yeah, thank you.
But I feel like that may need to come at a code level
Yeah.
to say, in regard to the alleyway discussion, if the garbage for a complex is in the alleyway, then that complex has a responsibility for either a portion or the whole thing. But I feel like that needs to come at a higher level than just the landlords, because they're not doing anything.
Thank you. I saw Kate and then Hopi, I think.
Of course, I don't like that this is a resident responsibility or a property owner responsibility, but I wonder about, sometimes the city gives out helmets for cyclists. I wonder about having snow shovels available that are like newer, useful, right, ergonomic, all those things that could be helpful. I wonder even about piloting some maybe neighborhood association project with a snow blower for a neighborhood, where some kind of like sidewalk-sized snow blower could, in a neighborhood, could like run it. I don't know, like for emergencies or for folks who can't get theirs cleared. I don't know. That's my idea.
Hopi, then Steve, then I'd like to take a turn.
Okay, thank you. Kind of going back to what Casey was saying about code changes, and also what Isabel said earlier about, so if an apartment complex, like, they might be required to shovel the sidewalks, but they aren't necessarily required to shovel from, an individual's door to the parking area, for example. And I guess the question would be whether we could put something in code that requires that. So like whether we could put something in code at all that requires like that access to trash bins. I mean, that's like a legal question as to whether we can do that. But then I also just, I think that we really need to reassess our fee structure and assess, I guess, just every part of it, including how much the fines are, and whether it's the same for everybody or whether it's different. How can we differentiate commercial complexes from single-family residents, from apartment complexes? Like, I feel like those are kind of 3 different categories in terms of businesses, and then like 2 categories of where people live, and then a category of businesses where people work, where people shop, and that those might all need to be a little bit different. Yeah, I guess that's the piece that I'm, in terms of solutioning. I think that we just need to make code a little bit stronger. And I mean, you have kind of the question of the efficacy of fines and whether fines do anything. I think that fines do something if they're high enough, especially for commercial entities. It really, really bothers me on the east side, the College Mall Road, which is, the mall on one side and lots of other businesses on the other side. And it's practically the last to get done. And those are all commercial entities pretty much, and it should not take that long for those folks to do that year after year after year.
Steve?
I think it was interesting what New York City did this year, where they threw money at the problem. They basically said, we're going to commit to clearing all the streets. They hired people to shovel. I wonder if there isn't a solution that involves adjusting the fine structure to be more appropriate with respect to the density of people who are being served. And once we know that we can recover some greater fines from greater enforcement, also hire people to shovel neighborhoods, shovel curb cuts, shovel trails, and let's find out how much it actually costs to get the level of service that we expect, and then recover some of that cost from the fines that it would certainly teach people to go and clean their own sidewalks if they got hit with a big fine because we had to hire people to shovel their sidewalk for them. I don't know how they did it. I don't know the details of it. I just know that it was big news in New York City this winter.
Yeah. I asked Michael Shermas about the Snow Buddies program and how it's going when he was at the Transportation Commission, and he mentioned, I think maybe a total of 30 volunteers, and that it was less about kind of neighbor to neighbor, and those kind of things are probably happening more informally, and more about people just volunteering to help with some issues, the curb ramps in particular, he mentioned, they would work on, and plus probably being deployed in some instances for assistance to a particular household.
But just to say that we're not going to volunteer.
I understand, yeah. No, I'm just sharing that that's where that kind of is currently. I wonder about leveraging neighborhood associations the way Kate was talking about too. Even if whether volunteer or paid, basically working with the neighborhood associations to make sure they all have communication on this and a plan in place. Are they helping to get the information out about responsibilities? As part of that, are they asking neighbors to help ask about and help their neighbors and identify if there's folks in their neighborhood that they can take care of who need it, and volunteers within the neighborhood unit? That'd be a really good way to leverage that infrastructure. The one other thing I wanted to highlight is, trying to really zero in on I agree with Kate that I'm not wild about the fact that we treat what is ostensibly the highest priority transportation mode at kind of the lowest level priority with respect to this issue. But that's probably a question of political will to make that shift. And there are some places, I think Bloomington, Minnesota actually clears all or most sidewalks, the city itself. I know Syracuse was doing a pilot in the downtown where they were having responses. So there are versions of this out there. It's usually places with more snow actually than what we get, because that's more predictable in a sense. I don't think we're probably there. And the question is what can we do that is most impactful at least cost maybe? And I think equipment needs or equipment sharing has come up, trying to clarify what are the equipment barriers that Adam is facing in Public Works. If HAND is going to continue, leading on enforcement, it seemed like there were software kind of challenges there that Anna was raising, and that they were switching back and forth between paper, citations and trying to look up property owners. That all seems like there's an integrated software solution of some kind. They shouldn't be looking up property owners on the fly. I don't know. So those kind of targeted interventions, and I think that could extend to paid folks for shoveling too, instead of relying purely on volunteers.
I wonder too about the gig economy in this, where it's almost like an Uber app, because it is so urgent. And what if it's a thing where you get on there and you're like, I need it shoveled, I'll pay this much right now, and I don't know if there is an app like that exists for like neighborhood help and things, but where, right, it's just people kind of negotiating on their own about what they might pay and who might go out and do it. Like, I would go shovel a little bit.
To branch off of your comment, the difficulty with something like that, is that while people they might be able to pay, or Bloomington might be able to develop something like that, for people with disabilities and the elderly, many of them are on fixed incomes, and they can't afford something like that. So you would automatically create an exclusion by doing something like that, by making it a pay-for-play type of service.
Yeah, and I wouldn't mean it as like an only solution, just as like, can some people take part in that, you know? I mean, I obviously think this should be a city service for all the sidewalks.
It could be a solution potentially to free up resources, but you'd have to be careful not to make it the only solution because you would create exclusion.
Right now, the only solutions we have besides what city staff can do are volunteer solutions. I'd rather see snow buddies helping people in need than people who, than just sort of random sections of the city. We could concentrate those volunteer resources for people who need it, but people who are property owners who can afford to pay the fine and who should be attending to this responsibility. We don't need to have a single solution for everybody. We can have multifaceted solution.
Hopi?
I just wanted to highlight what Kate said earlier about the neighborhood associations and you know, there's small and simple grants that neighborhood associations take advantage of, and maybe there could literally be like a snowblower grant. And I'm pretty sure I'm remembering right that there's somebody in Park Ridge East who likes his snowblower so much that he snowblows a whole bunch of sidewalk for people there. And I mean, I have to say, I enjoy shoveling snow a couple times a year. And I also, my spouse actually went and shoveled several cars out of a nearby senior living complex for random people during this storm, just for exercise and fun. So there are people that would use that snowblower and would very much enjoy. You could get a whole network probably of people who would enjoy running the snowblower, and that if we had some kind of neighborhood grant related to that, then that could at least, you know, take care of certain places, and especially some of those really high traffic, like high pedestrian traffic sorts of places, and maybe depending on where it is, you could even incorporate that into some bus stops, depending on where those snow blowers were kept and where the bus stops are.
There is an app for that, an app called Shoveler, the app that removes snow. You can become a shoveler or request a shoveler for your home or your business or your, I don't know. I think there's a combination of solutions here.
One I'd really like to see is move toward proactive enforcement, if not citywide, which probably isn't feasible, on like the high entry network in particular, and or like downtown kind of overlay. It seems highly feasible. It may well be that parking enforcement actually has very low work volumes during snow events, or you know, lower. And would be able to take some of that on. And maybe it's a bifurcated responsibility. Maybe HAND is doing neighborhood education and citations for the one-off sidewalk gap in a neighborhood that somebody's reporting. But you know, there's a core area that's delineated that's different. Because it seems that the reactiveness is actually part of the operational challenge that Anna has highlighted. That people are trying to do their regular job, and then they're left responding to this thing, and they can't respond quickly enough, and Casey.
This isn't actually a solution, this is a question
Sure.
from earlier. Who is responsible for areas in Bloomington that are under construction when it snows. For example, the Hopewell neighborhood and 2nd Street, because this last winter I actually got stuck there for about 30 minutes because it wasn't shoveled, and
Yeah.
the police ended up having to come get me.
It's the property owner, so it's the city of Bloomington
Okay.
in that case. But that points to RDC. I think in particular we've identified as maybe having some gaps in compliance. But yeah.
And one of the things, one solution I think the city needs to kind of think about is in snow events, how to handle older sidewalks. Because for example, 2nd Street, it's not just the sidewalk, it's quite old. And because it's being developed, a lot of the maintenance of it has kind of come to a point of, well, we'll get to it when we redo it all. And the difficulty, especially on 2nd in some areas, is that there are some curb cuts that are a little more curb than cut. And they don't go straight ahead. They go to an angle, and that angle goes into traffic.
Right.
So I feel like with curb cuts when it snows, it's not just about clearing them, but also marking where are they, because when we get deep snow and the snow starts to pile, the level of the snow and the level of the curb can become even, and you can't see where the cut is. And when you have a curb cut like on some of the 2nd Street ones that go at an angle, you don't want to miss the curb cut and be thrown into traffic.
Yeah.
So I think it's not just about clearing the curb cuts, but making sure that it's clear where are they when it snows.
Yeah. It reminds me, I mean, we've talked about this issue, like it might be a code thing too, to clarify responsibilities that extend to, to the street, or like all the way to the street edge or whatever, right? That it's not, if you're on adjacent to an alley or a street.
So it would include the alley, you mean?
No, not include the alley. That is a separate issue. But like, I think some people are clearing sidewalks like to the corner, but like not the ramp part going to the street,
gotcha.
essentially. Yeah.
Matt, are
Dave?
you following an agenda right now? Or
We just by Kate's vote and no other objections, I just we are in the workshopping specific issues section of the agenda, and we're treating that list of 11 or so things as ideation here, and we're in those categories, including the other.
Well, this would be under the topic of city-owned properties, I guess.
Yeah.
And that would be an unmet need, it seems to me, is accessibility to parking meters. So not only if you park a car, you need at least some access to the sidewalk. Say, picture the square, I need to get to the sidewalk. And there's usually a barrier of maybe a snowbank that I have to navigate, and there's no way to get there. It takes me into traffic. So, and then I've got to feed the meter, and that's not always, maybe in the square, you can reach over to it. But I've been on, I don't know.
I wonder if the microphones are catching what you're saying, Dave, because you're so far away. I'm just concerned about people on cats not hearing you.
It's everything I said.
We're catching some of it.
Sorry, I had to plug in my computer. And I'm going to point to you in a moment. So the point is accessibility to parking meters. And in some cases, I've had to walk into like a snowbank in order to feed a meter. And I imagine everyone else is doing that too at some point. So, Steve, do you have a?
Well,
I find it's your responsibility, so.
Yeah, I'll take it. The Parking Services Division did commission a study on parking, the first one since 2018. It just came in. We've just issued comments on it. It's about to come to the City Council within, I don't know, probably before the break. And one of the strong recommendations in it, something that I know Parking Services has wanted for a long time, the elimination of single space meters, that they're expensive, they're hard to maintain. I suspect that I mean, acknowledging everything you said, and I pointed out earlier, I think that when the meters get so full of snow, we need to find out exactly what the protocol is for enforcement officers. Do they bother to enforce when nobody can get to the meter? But it will be easier to prevent snow from blocking meters if we go to meters that are for a half block or a full block, where you have to go to the meter to pay and then maybe put a piece of paper in your window, or you give your license plate there. If there's only 1 or 2 meters per block, it'll be much easier to clear the snow around it and make them accessible. It doesn't really address, I mean, because right now the meters are sort of in the right-of-way where Public Works deposits the snow, right? They're shoveling the snow into the meters. So if there's only 1 or 2 multi-space meters per block, that should eliminate one small part of this large problem. I'm certainly going to recommend that they go to that kind of meter.
And so just to follow that, sounds good, but
Microphone.
are the spaces going to be labeled such
But
that?
the microphone pointed towards you, there you go.
Sorry.
Mellifluous voice.
Is are the parking spaces labeled so I can, well enough say that it,
This may
during a snow,
exceed the scope of.
I can, yeah, but I'm just.
No. There's
just
pay
following
by,
this line of
there's pay
reasoning.
by space and there's pay by plate. And if you can, I mean, Park Mobile, the app, expects you to have a plate, and then it doesn't matter
Okay.
that you're at a particular meter or
Okay.
space.
So let's move on to just a brief touching base on next steps. I've taken notes and documented questions that folks have for follow-up. I anticipate probably having a conversation with the various department heads, and also probably John Connell or someone from Bloomington Transit to talk a little bit more about exploring some of these concepts. I think at minimum, the council's purview clearly extends to code and looking at potential adjustment to the fine schedule and some of the details around that. I think there's also probably some budgetary implications, pedestrian accessibility and safety in the context of snow events did enter our budget priorities document this year, so it shouldn't be a surprise if we're coming with some specific ideas in that vein. And then probably some of the operational stuff might be more about clarifying things, identifying opportunities through that conversation where there might be some gaps, like Kate, you brought up the one around if the width of the beeline right-of-way is 20 feet wide in some areas, but we're only clearing the 12 feet of path, then maybe that is an operational change for parks to, And so identifying some of those things, and then some of the processes that might support it. So, the sidewalk operations plan, or, the reporting process and things like that. So I plan to work on those things. I would welcome a colleague or 2 or 3, whoever, sub-quorum amounts would make it easiest and most feasible to be able to meet with staff with ease and that kind of thing. Are there others who are interested in working on next steps at some level? Hopi?
I'm interested in working on the code change stuff. I think I mentioned that to you, and kind of exploring different potentials for the fee structure, and I guess just I don't know how much procedure we want to code, but yeah.
Well, hand is specifically called out. We could explore other options if there's going to be enforcement beyond that. Others interested in, yeah.
I think the CCA would definitely want to be looped into that. I don't know if I myself would be able to do it, but I know others would be interested.
Yeah, great. Yeah, no, definitely any proposed policy change and that kind of thing would be, I think, done in conjunction with Transportation Commission and CCA. Yeah.
Matt, when you say, when everyone's saying fee, is that, we really mean fine when we say fee here?
Yeah. Fine schedule. Did I say fee?
Fee is generally
Yeah,
pay
fine.
for something you're planning to do. So we should call it fine.
Fine.
We should refer
Yes,
to it
yes.
as fine.
I said fee. I should be saying fine.
I'm super interested in getting sidewalks cleared. So, as in not as much of the fine situation, but the actual getting the snow off of them.
So maybe additional.
If we're getting specific
Solutions.
about the help, or the
Yeah, yeah.
input and the work, yeah. Hopi seems to be very interested in the fine situation, and that's great. And I
I think
feel
it's service too, but yeah.
I feel interested in the snow blower situation.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah, and I want to clarify that part of my like motivation for that is I do think that the fines can be effective, especially for commercial entities. And so that's my interest in increasing fines and changing fine structures, is especially as it relates to commercial interests, just so that any constituents out there don't get like, oh my gosh, that Councilmember Stossberg wants to. No, it's about businesses that should be doing this anyway and aren't.
Steve?
Well, this goes to Andy's question. I mean, the whole purpose behind parking fees is to get compliance, not to necessarily make money for the city, but it pays for the service of providing parking. In the same way, whether it's a fee beforehand or a fine after, the goal is compliance. And I think that what Hopi and Kate are saying are kind of the same thing. You're not looking to charge fines for the sake of it. You're looking for it so that you can get streets cleared. At least that's what any kind of fine structure should be about. I don't think we should go to a fee structure where we charge people in advance for it. So I appreciate that you made the distinction. But in theory, it's possible we do that already with other services in the city, parking being the primary example.
So I'm hearing Hopi, Kate, some interest in collaboration going forward. I would anticipate reporting back periodically to the council on progress on some of this too. Anybody else want to be looped in on particular aspects of this going forward beyond that? Nope. Okay.
I'll be happy to help if you want to plug me in where needed.
Okay.
I don't have a specific, but if you're like, hey, we could use a hand here.
Yeah.
Sure, give me a call.
Great. Thank you. With that, maybe we can move on to a final round of public comment about the overall process, next steps here, et cetera. I do see we have one member of the public in chambers. If you would like to comment. No comments, okay. Anyone online who would like to comment? No comments. All right. Anything else? Any final clarifying questions about, yeah, Steve?
What's your timeline? How soon do you want to see a change in policy? A year, 6 months?
I think things with budget, for this coming season, for this coming winter season.
Okay.
So I think we should aim to have code changes, any potential operational updates and reporting on that, and any budget requests, obviously for this budget cycle. So it'll probably be iterative, but all those things I'd like to make progress on this year.
Is there one particular staff or member or department who would coordinate a response from inquiries from council? Or in other words, if the Transportation Commission took it up as an inquiry, we'd involve planning and transportation and engineering, but we might be repeating work that somebody else is already doing.
Yeah, potentially Hank Duncan, the pedestrian bicycle coordinator, is a suitable position to kind of be in a convening role. Planning department generally, maybe also like Ryan Roebling, I don't know. Public Works does a lot of this, obviously, on the city operations side, but it's just multifaceted. There's multiple departments involved.
Right, that's why I asked you.
So I think we've named the right people for the most part and identified a few more transit. But yeah.
I'm sure we can get ITS involved somehow.
Yeah. Well, I did reach out about the data analysis from your reports. That's something we should probably be leveraging a whole lot more than we do.
HR.
Yep. All right. With that, thank you all for your ideation and thoughtfulness. I think we are adjourned.
I think Courtney has to adjourn us.
Oh, we just offered it.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's okay. Yeah, there was no one. Yep.
Yeah.
I think
All right.
Courtney has to adjourn us, though.
Oh, yeah. I'll turn it back to the chair of the meeting to adjourn us properly.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you.